Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning to those of you in the States and west of where I am. Thanks for joining today's webinar. So we're going out to you not only in our webinar system, our webinar room, but also out onto Facebook and YouTube as well. So triple streaming today, so we do our best to manage all of your questions and comments. So today is all about organizing with sessions. More on that in a second. I'll just go through a couple of housekeeping things. Those of you on YouTube and Facebook, feel free to put your questions and comments in there. I can monitor them as well. And we have a couple of eager Capture One staff members keeping an eye on things too. Generally for today, we have around 60 minutes allocated. I said this morning I wouldn't go over that, but I did. So depending how we go today, I will try to keep that. But there's quite a lot to talk about, so we shall see. But I'll do my best to keep it under the hour. We are recording this, so as it's going out on YouTube and Facebook, it will just be available straight away. You're very welcome to submit your questions, comments at any time. In the webinar room with me is also my colleague Andre, and he's going to help out mopping up some questions too. Also, for those of you who've joined in the webinar room, you'll also get an exit survey in a couple of hours time. So it's great if you could spend 1 minute answering that as well. Now, if you're sitting with me inside the webinar room, just make sure you put your questions in the Q&A tab. It's just easier for us to follow rather than getting lost in the chat. So that's the second tab you'll see on the interface. Now, if asking questions and chatting nicely with your friends is not for you, then you can always hide that panel just by clicking on the arrow in the right hand side, and then that will hide that area. And I'm sure most of you have figured out how to ask questions on YouTube and Facebook. So let us begin. So, as I said, what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about organizing in sessions. Now, this is a follow-up to an earlier webinar where we spoke about catalogs. Now, the first question which normally comes up is what's the difference between a session and a catalog? And that's the first thing I'm going to answer in a second. So what we're going to do is looking at importing into a session, organizing within a session. Lots of comments came in last week after we did a webinar with Joe McNally, because he is just simply using a session to browse an existing system of hard drives. So we're going to look at how to do that at the end as well. And then in a further sort of follow up to that, we can also run a session on shooting tethered into a session. So that's something which I'll plan to do as an extra as well, because we could also talk for an hour about shooting tethered. Now, the first question, just to prevent all you guys and girls asking it, is what's the difference between a catalog and a session? Very simple, short sentence and statement to describe it is that a catalog is really designed to give you a broad overview of your life's work, of your portfolio, if you like. So if you have 20,000 shots in your life's work, which is roughly what I have, then a catalog is a great way to have an overview of that with very powerful ways to organize, filter, keyword, all those kinds of things. Now, a session is very much designed to work for one project. So that could be a tethered shoot in the studio. It could be me going out tomorrow, shooting some landscapes, and that's the end of it. Or it could be like a long form project over 4 weeks or 5 weeks or something. But again, one project. It's not designed to give you powerful tools for, organizing like a catalog would with some of the techniques that we spoke about in the last webinar. So catalog, broad overview of your life's work, session, a project. Now, what I also want you to think about is that the session concept is actually very simple and very basic. So you can keep it super simple, or you can modify it, adapt it, and make it into something much more powerful for your needs. But the basic concept is actually super, super simple. Now, where I see people getting stuck and tripped up is when they try to make a session do something that it wasn't designed to do, i.e. make it behave like a catalog, for example. That's not its purpose. So if you're trying to stuff square pegs in round holes, this is where you get tripped up. But if you use the session as it was designed, it's a super brilliant method for workflow. Okay, so that was enough of an intro, I think. Some images you can see on screen. So these are the shots we're going to use today. It's actually a double ambassador showcase. So that's Tina, our ambassador, shot by a different ambassador, Renee Robin. So I thought this was a good set of pictures to use because it's kind of like a day shoot in one location, but with, you know, various different sub locations and so on. So I'm going to close this down and we're going to start from scratch. Okay, so we're going to say File, New Session, and start with our new session. So let's call this Renee, never sure if I get the right number of N's and E's. So let's say Renee Robin, and they shot this in Las Vegas. So let's call that LB. So this is the name of our master session. Now I'm going to pretty much do everything today as default. So we're not going to do anything fancy out of left field or anything, all nice, simple, straightforward stuff. So when you try this at home, it's going to behave in much the same way. Now, location wise, where do we want to store our session? I'm just going to leave it in the default place, which is the pictures folder. Now, if you want to put it somewhere else, which you can click on the three dots and pop your session in a different place. Now, it could be on an external hard drive, network attached storage, doesn't matter. Performance wise, obviously the internal drive is going to work the best. Anything outside of that, like external drives and so on, performance is really based on their read-write speed. But let's keep it simple on our internal drive, and everything else not going to touch. It's going to stay as default. So let's say OK. So Capture One opens up. Let's actually look and see what we have created. So if we're looking in our Finder, in our Pictures folder, here's what we made. So let's make this a bit bigger so you can see it. So as I said, I called it Renee Robin LV for Las Vegas, and you can see the title up here on the session. And what the default session structure does is build out these four folders. So capture, output, selects, and trash. And the most basic workflow idea is that obviously your captures go in the capture folder. When we export to final options like JPEG and TIFF, they go to the output folder. We have a selects folder which you can choose to use or ignore, which we'll talk about too. And there's a trash folder, which is where all the rejects go. The good news is that if you trash something you didn't mean to, then you can always recover it. Now, looking over in Capture One, you can see we've got the same four shortcuts to those folders: capture, selects, output, and trash, like so. Very simple. Now, right now, our session is empty, of course. So what we're going to look at is two different ways to import into a session. There's the dead simple drag and drop method, and there's the more sophisticated method of using the import window. But let's start with the super simple one because we like simple. So I'm just going to go to my external hard drive and let's find those images that we were looking at earlier. So they're in Renee's folder over here. So let's select all of these, and I'm going to select my capture folder here, and I'm just going to copy them into this session. So let's just get them into the captures folder like so. So I'm just copying them off from that hard drive. You could be copying this off a memory card and so on. And look what's happening behind. Capture One sees, aha, there's a bunch of pictures in this folder now. I better start displaying them in Capture One, as you can see. So that's 54 shots coming in as we speak. So as we scroll down, you can see the little progress bar there, and Capture One's just making a preview, applying the default settings, all the kind of normal Capture One stuff that we have done. So that's just really a dead simple way to get photos into a session. Could be from a memory card, dump them into the capture folder, Capture One picks them up. Easy. Hold that thought for a minute. I'll show you an alternative method that we could do if you want to use the import window. And the benefit of using the import window is that we could rename our files, we could add some metadata, we could put them into different subfolders and so on. So I'm going to very quickly show you that in case that's useful. Now I don't want to mess up this session, so I'm going to make another session. And let's just call this Canada, because the shots I've got are from Canada 2019. Again, leaving everything as default. And let's say OK. So now I've got another empty session. It's going to look exactly the same as Renee's session. So there's Renee's, there's the Canada session, like so. But this time we're going to use the import dialog. So I've got a memory card sitting, it's probably not going to focus. I'm sure you can see a memory card sitting in a reader. So let's plug this guy in like so, and it will just take a second to pop up. And then once we've gone through this import process, I'll have a look at the questions and comments. So straight away you can see our import dialog has popped up like so. And it's showing me the contents of the card. There's only 20 shots on there. I didn't think you'd want to sit through and watch 500 pictures import in. But as I said, the benefit of using the import window over just a simple dump into the capture folder is that we can do a few more sophisticated things. One of those things is that we can divide up our captures into different subfolders, because there could easily be a situation where having a single capture folder is not suitable enough or extensive enough in terms of your organization. So you can see here in the first box, this one, import to, where do we want to put our photos in the capture folder? If you're not entirely sure where that is, click on this arrow and then we can see, okay, it's the capture folder in my Canada session. Great. Now underneath we've got a subfolder which we can create just by typing. So I could just type photos like so, and Capture One would make that folder for me. Or we can use a concept which we're going to see throughout this webinar, which is using something called a token. Now what a token does, it looks at some aspect of the photo, like the day it was taken, the kind of camera that was used, a color tag that was perhaps applied, where the photo actually is, all kinds of things that could describe something about that photo. Now in this case, I'm going to use the day that it was captured to sort these photos. So if I click on this little box here, I get this raft of various different tokens which all point to some aspect of the metadata. So as there is many and you will only use few, then we can sort them into various different categories. So I'm going to say date and time, and here's various date tokens that we can use, and I want to use the image date. So I can just drag and drop it into this box, let go, and now Capture One will look at each photo as it imports it and see, okay, this was captured on June the 11th, 2020. Let's put it in this folder. Oh, the next shot was captured on June the 12th. Let's put it in this folder, and so on. Now, if you don't like this format, let's go for year, month, day. And now it gives you a sample below, just reflecting how it's going to look. So let's say, okay. Now, if I want to, I could do some renaming. So here I've got, again, a token concept of using, if we click this, a job name and a 4-digit counter. So I've set my job name over here. So it's going to be Canada number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Again, you can pull out a whole collection of different tokens by dragging and dropping and building your naming convention. Say OK to that, and then we can add our copyright. So let's say David, whoops, can't spell my own name. David Grover 2019. This is 2020, actually. So what Capture One will do is going to sort them all into an individual folders. So let's say import all like so, and we see this dialog. What does that mean? Because these photos are going to be sorted into different folders, Capture One's simply making me an easy collection over here as an album, so I can see them all together if I wish. So if I say OK, I generally rename these albums, because untitled album is not very helpful, to like import 1. And then a few days on in this little project of my Canada vacation, I'd have an import 2 and an import 3 and so on. Okay, so now let's have a look and see what happened in this session. So if we look here, let's close down a few Finder windows so it's less cluttered. So now we can see in the capture folder, we've got the 9th of August, 2019, the 10th, the 11th, the 13th, 19th, and they've been all automatically sorted in those folders. So what happens now, remember we've got our 4 folders, capture, output, selects, and trash. So if I go to the capture folder, it's empty. That's annoying. How do I get to those individual folders? I can go to my import 1, but I can't actually see those individual folder contents. So this is where session favorites comes in. So if I right click on my capture folder and say show in library, Capture One will show me the exact path to my session like so. So what this means, rather than having to browse down into the session itself, I can actually add these as a favorite. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can hit the plus button and just target the favorite. You can right click on a folder and say add to favorites, like so, and away it goes. If you're on a Mac, you can actually just grab the folders and drag them to session favorites, like so. And then now I've got the ability to go through all those various different folders and see them like so. So that's a much more extensive import process than the simple drop into a capture folder, but it does give you those more options of auto subfolder creating, adding your metadata, copyright information. We could have added an adjustment if we wanted to. So in the import dialog, you can see down here, we can also add a style and so on. So have a little nose around this window to see what more you can do. So that's, again, two different methods of import. Let's have a quick look at the questions. Let's see. Lots and lots of questions coming in. As it's very busy, I apologize if we don't answer your very specific question. And if it's not about today's subject, it might get skipped as well. But we do as much as possible. I just saw one flash past. Let's see. David says, are you going to cover master sessions to scan an existing folder structure? Yes, we'll do that right at the end. Are we doing a session on catalogs? We did that, Tommy, already. So this is like the follow-up to that. So go back to our Learning Hub and you can find that out as well. Can tokens be used for naming convention? Yes, Robert, as you briefly saw. And then also when we come to export, then we can use tokens there as well. And just looking at YouTube and Facebook to see if we have any questions in there. No, I think you're pretty good. Let's see, what's Kenny saying? I've been using sessions and been importing them into a catalog. That's going to come up at the end. And the performance of the catalog is slower. Is this because smart previews need to be built? I'd say the performance between session and catalog will be similar, but of course, whenever you import into a session or a catalog, the preview process is the same as well. And a good question from Sarah, actually very relevant. How do you set the naming counter? So if we look at naming, see by default it starts at 1. If we click on the little 3 dots, you can reset it or set it to a certain number and how it should count up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so on. So that's a really good question. Thanks, Sarah. Sorry for missing that. Okay, so 2 different methods of importing, as I said. So I'm going to close this Canada one down and we're going to go back to our Renee's Las Vegas shoot, like so. Now, right now, all of this, if we right click here, all of our shots are sitting in our capture folder. What if I want to manually, drop those into different folders just to help our organization? Because let's say instead of shooting 54 shots, there was 300 in here over lots of different locations. Now it will be much slicker and much nicer to be able to organize these into different folders. And also when we export, we do some tricks for that as well. So if we go to right click on capture folder and say show in library, that's going to show me my location. Now if I want to make some extra folders, I can just right click and say new folder, and let's just say location 1. I was typing location this morning and it took too long, so I'm just going to say lock 1, and then I can grab some shots. That looks pretty much the same spot, and then drag and drop them into lock 1 like so. And notice that they move. Now if I go back into the Finder, you can now see we've got a lock 1 folder and it's moved the shots in there. Physically move them on my storage. Now as we're looking in Finder, often the question comes up, what's this funny little subfolder? And this also highlights a difference between a catalog and a session. So a catalog stores its adjustments in a centralized database. So the catalog is like the all-seeing brain, whereas a session needs to store the adjustments for folder contents in a sidecar folder like so. So these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shots here. Sorry, mental blank. These 6 shots here, their adjustments, metadata, keywords, all that kind of stuff are held in these separate side folders. Now you have to live with the fact that this folder is here. Delete it and then you'll lose your adjustments. So just make sure you keep those folders safe. Okay. Okay, so let's continue. So let's make a couple more folders. I'll make a new folder and we're going to call this lock2, like so. And then Capture One will make that, and then these look like they're all shot in the same spot, so we can move these to location 2 as well, and so on. Now you can make them within Capture One, or equally you can make them within Finder or Windows Explorer. So if I make a new folder here and call this Lock3, then you see straight away it pops up into Capture One like so. Now I could also start dragging and dropping in the Finder, but it's not so easy because I don't get the visual reference of these shots. So I'm going to just do that in Capture One and they physically move again. So let's make another folder. I won't do like a million locations. So Lock4, so that looks pretty much the same, or cactuses. And then we're going to have, oops, put this one over here, rename it. So this is going to be Lock5 and drop this, sorry, what am I doing? It's automatic, David, and then let's call this location 5, and then we just do one more because I just want a few different locations. So when we look at exporting, you can see how that works. So once again, let's make a new one, location 6, and let's dump everything else into that. I'm sure you get the idea how folder creation works. Now, same as before, if I want a quick, easy way to browse these, then what I want to do is just drag and drop these into my session favorites. So now I can easily go to location 1, location 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. Easy. So that's, if you like, some very simple organization using folders, and you saw that automatically with the import process or manually making folders here. Now you may ask, what's the point of adding them to session favorites? The reason for that is A, for convenience, because I can just easily select my various different locations. And secondly, it's when we start to use these session albums, which we're going to look at shortly. So what the session albums do is that they, or the smart albums I should say, is that they populate themselves based on certain search criteria. So 2 default ones are included, so that's all images in your session, so that's all 54. And then that's any which have 5 stars, which there are currently none. Now this smart album only looks for shots in our default session folders and the session favorites. So if I didn't add these to session favorites, then this kind of smart album would be dead, if you like, because it doesn't have anything to look at. So it's really important that you add your subfolders into your session favorites. Okay, let's have a little look over on YouTube and Facebook. Ryan was asking, quick one, sir, any difference for catalog and sessions in the latest version and the previous version of Capture One? Not really, no. So if you're on version 12, anything that you look at here is going to be the same for version 12. So don't worry about that. Brandy says, excited to learn about culling. Aha, that's coming up next. We got 2 different things that you could work with as well. Let's take a look at one more. And again, if there's questions we've missed, we can always circle back to YouTube and Facebook at a later time and try and answer those as well. And don't forget, our support guys are always on hand to answer your questions too. Okay, last one, Serge, that's probably a good one. If shooting several looks during a studio session, would creating different folders 1, 2, 3 in the capture folder be better than using session favorites as far as skipping this step? What I would do, Serge, imagine this is your shot 1, look 2, look 3, look 4. Great tip. Any of these you can right click on and say, this is my capture folder. So now when you shoot, the next shot would go to that capture folder. And that's something we can dig into much deeper in the future when we do a session specifically on tethering. But that's the fastest way to do it for sure. All right, so Brandy, culling, and all those various kinds of things. So let's look at that. So we've got two options again for culling, is that we've got the selects folder that comes into play, or we've got session albums that come into play. Now, I'm not a big user of the selects folder, purely because I like to keep my shots organized. Sorry, I just realized my audio monitor's a bit loud. Don't want to hear me twice, once is enough. I don't use the selects folder much because I like to keep my shots organized in their various shoot folders, if you like. So then moving them out of those shoot folders doesn't really make sense to me. But I'll show you how the selects folder works. And to be honest, if you're just doing a really quick shoot, then the selects folder is great because it's very simple. So if I was just going to quickly run to my friend Chris's house and do a new headshot for him, then I would use the selects folder, because we'd go bang, 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 shoot 50 shots and say, okay, this one, this one, this one, this one. So a simple super culling process. So if we were to use the selects folder, it's dead simple. All we do is pick up a shot and we drag and drop it to the selects folder, pick up a shot, drag and drop it to the selects folder. Don't want this one, do I want this one? I'd like that. Drag and drop it to the selects folder. Now that physically moves it as well. So if we go and look at our session, you can now see we've moved those shots and all their adjustments have come with it as well. So it's just a simple drag and drop. If you prefer to use a shortcut, then you'll see under, where is it, adjustments, image, move to selects folder, the default is Command J. So if I'm just arrowing through shots, I can say, let's take that one, Command J, and it moves it to the selects folder. Now you do get a warning, which will become annoying because it will keep popping up. But in your preferences, if you go to warnings, you can turn those move warnings off. So that way you won't get that annoying warning after all. Now there's nothing to stop you going to the selects folder. Let's just select all of those and I can move them back. It's just all a simple drag and drop workflow. So I said, if you're doing a super simple session, then using the selects folder is great. Now, if you're involved in something a bit heavily, like Serge was talking about with his multiple looks in a studio, then I think it's far better and faster to use session albums, smart albums. So how we do that? And this is where, Brandy, we can get into a few more sophisticated culling techniques. So as a first pass, I would go through each of these different locations, if you like, and then start with kind of pass one. Now there's thousands of different ways to do this. Some people start with 1 star and bump them up to 2. Some people start with a color tag. Some people start with a star rating and so on. So what we're going to do is, first of all, make sure we've got this guy turned on. Select next when star rated. So that means when a photo gets star rated, that it'll automatically jump to the next shot. So it just saves you a keyboard press. Now you might think, well, a keyboard press isn't much really, but if you multiply 500 shots by 500 key presses, time gets significant. So the more we can reduce you having to pick up a pen or a mouse, the better. So looking at these shots, let's say that's a great shot. I'm going to hit 5 on my keyboard and that's going to mark it 5 stars. This is also great. That's great. Tina's a great model. So that's 5 star. Now, if I want to skip something to go to the next one, you think, David, you're going to have to use your shortcut key or mouse to bypass this shot. But if I hit 0, then it just goes to the next shot because effectively I've 0 tagged it. So, and now I'm going to say 5 stars. Great. So that's location 1 dealt with. So now I have to go to location 2. Now there's also a shortcut for moving through your different collections. So any of these we refer to technically as a question. So if you look in the select menu, you'll see next collection is Control Shift S. And that's going to bounce to my next selection. So if I hit Control Shift S, then we've moved down to my next collection, location 2. Now, once again, you're going to say, aha, but you have to pick up your mouse to then select the first shot. Not so. There's actually a shortcut, which is first image. So if we look at edit keyboard shortcuts and turn in and type in first, you can see I have select first as command slanty arrow. Now, if you don't have a full-size keyboard, you won't have that key. It's just to the left of the numerical keypad. But don't forget, you could assign anything you want. So if I choose command slanty arrow, then automatically the first image is picked up. So I wouldn't have to use my mouse or pen or whatever to do so. So now I'm going to do the same thing. That's a 5-star. Oops, helps if capture one is in focus. That's a 5-star, that's 5. Let's say 0, that's a 5-star, 5-star, 5-star. And then we can go through. That's Renee's edit, as you can see. Courtesy, a little bit of retouching. And now we want to go to location 3. So Shift Control S takes me to the next one. Command slanty arrow. And straight away I'm on the first shot, like so. So if you really want to reduce the amount of mouse picking up and clicking, you can do so. You can blast through it with keyboard shortcuts. So once again, great shot. So 5 stars, 5 stars, that's a 5. There we go. And then if I want to skip, I can hit 0 and so on. Shift Control S, next shot, slanty command slanty arrow, and there we go. So let's say 5, 5. And yeah, let's make that a 5 as well. I'm going to end up with too many for exporting. So even though they're all good, I'm going to just restrict what we pick so we're not editing too much. So once again, we can go through nice and quick. If I need to go back, I can just arrow left and right like so. So it's very fast to move through. So let's just pick a couple out of here. So let's grab one other, 5 stars, and so on. Now another cool thing you can do, as we've got to our last collection, is something called sets. So some people find it more useful to look at shots in the viewer, 2 or 3 at the same time. So let's shift select 2 photos together. So now we've got 2 shots. Especially if you have a lot of similar shots, sometimes it's nice to be able to, look at 2 very similar ones side by side. So this is a good example because we have a landscape and a portrait. So which one's best? So right now I'm just going to turn off select next when for this next little demo and think, okay, out of these 2, which one do I favor? Do I prefer the portrait or the landscape? I think I prefer the portrait. So I'm going to hit 5 on my keyboard, like so. Problem, because now both of them have a 5-star rating, which is not what I wanted. So if I say 0, that's going to reset it all. And this kicks in a curious and often confusing feature which will catch every one of us out at some point, which is this toggle up here, edit selected. So with this on, this simply generally means do the action to everything. So if I'm adding a color tag, adding a star rating, rotating the images by 90 degrees, using a shortcut to change exposure or something like that, then it will happen to all the shots. In this case, I don't want it to happen to all the shots. So if we turn off edit selected, and if I use my cursor keys to pick up the primary, that's the one with the thick white border. So that's the portrait one. And now if I hit 5, that just puts the 5-star tag on the next one. Now, if you remember, we've got 2 images selected. So Capture One now thinks of this as a set. So now if we go to select, and look down here, you see we've got a shortcut for next set. So if I say next set, Capture One will pick up the next 2 shots. Now if I'd selected 5 shots, 6 shots, if I had a big 4K screen, then we could work on 6 shots or 8 or whatever. I think the maximum is 16. So now if I press next set, then Capture One picks up the next 2. So I can look at these 2 shots and think, out of these 2, let's go for this one. Next set, use my shortcut key, picks up the next 2. Pick up these, and again, if we did this with 4 shots, see if I've got enough screen real estate to do it. So if I pick up 4 shots, then we can see all 4 of these like so. So out of these 4, I'd like to have this one and this one like so. Now if I want to zoom into all of them, I can hold my shift key down and click on plus, and then we can see 100% of everything like so if we wanted to check focus and so on and so forth. So I'm happy with that. So I'll move to my next set. Out of these ones, let's grab this one, and so on. So sets are really good. When eventually I get to the end of the shots, then you see capture one's picked up 2 because there wasn't 4 left, but when I go back, then it picks up 4 again, like so. So out of these, let's grab one of those, and nice aeroplane shot. Let's grab this one. Okay, so lots of different ways to color and so on. So that's like pass 1, if you like. Now if I go to my 5-star collection, you can see we've got all the shots that we marked as 5 stars. Now going through these, again, this is why I like doing this system. If we went to a shot and we thought, actually, I didn't want to pick that one, or we've got 2 that are very similar, can make Tina dance. If we've got 2 that are very similar and think, you know what, out of these 2, I only need one of these, so I'm going to grab that one. So what I'll do is I'll just mark this one with 0 stars. So as soon as I hit 0, then it's gone from that collection. So to me, that's a lot quicker than having to drag and drop from various different folders and so on. It's really nice and dynamic. And I can see I've got 26 shots up here, and then this just really allows you to be fast and dynamic. Now, my personal second sort of pass is to then think about using color tags. Okay, quick look at questions. Alan, these weren't shot in Canada. These were, I think Tina's watching on Facebook. So Tina, you might know somewhere in Nevada, I would think. But just, it was a couple of years ago now, I think. I can't remember. But always good when our ambassadors get together. Question from Brandy. When you're viewing 4 photos at once and zoom in, why is it sometimes that only 1 photo zooms in? Is there a shortcut? So by default, if we pick up 4 shots again, if I click on plus, then it's only going to do the primary. So what you want to do is hold down Shift and click on the plus, and then they're all going to zoom in like so. And then if you keep your Shift key down when you pan around, then they're all panned at the same rate. So shift click like so. You can also use the focus tool. So focus tool like so. This will just zoom into a certain point. You can pick up the little magnifier glass here, and then you can tap on a shot quite quickly and check for focus as well. Or another alternative is that you can use the loop, this guy, and then you can just click on any of the shots, and then it will render that in focus as well. So that's your other option as well. Personally, because computers are pretty quick now, I found the easiest way is just to shift click on the plus and minus. There's virtually no delay in rendering it to 100%. So I hope that helps. But if you're on an older machine, then you've got the loop tool, or you've got the focus tool as well. Just saw a question in the webinar room. When you hit the 0 star, it goes away. Is it deleted or it stays somewhere else? Remember, these folders, these are virtual. So we haven't actually moved anything out of these locations. Sorry, I didn't make that especially clear. So for example, in location 1, we've marked this at 5 stars. This simply means it also appears in the 5-star collection, but it hasn't been moved anywhere. This is why I favor it, because it's a lot faster and a lot more dynamic. Okay, what I would do next, and I'll move through it relatively quickly, is that out of all my 5-star shots, I would think, you know what, I want to pick 5 or 6 just to kind of get started with for editing straight away. So a similar thing, we can add a color tag. You can either click here and pick it up, or of course you can use a shortcut key as well. So under adjustments, if you look at color tag, you can see the various different shortcuts or possible shortcuts that can be set for various different colors. I use 7 for green because on a numerical keypad, you can use 7, 8, 9, 7 for green, 8 for yellow, 9 for red. So again, this would be a similar process. If we turn on select next when color tagged, then I can just hit 7 for green. For no color tag, don't even know if I have a shortcut for that set. Let's just check. Color tag none. So I'm going to change that. So remember, go to edit keyboard shortcuts, type in none. There we go. And I'm going to set it to 6 on my keyboard, like so. So now if I hit 6 on my keyboard, it just doesn't change the color tag and it advances to the next one. So now I can just pick a few out. Let's pick 10 or so. Let's grab that one. And I'm just using 6 to advance forward, and then 7 to mark it green, and then it automatically selects the next. That's a great shot. Let's take that one. Let's pick, and if I go too far, I can just arrow backwards. So let's pick that one, and let's keep going. So I don't want to pick too many because we're going to do processing in a second. So I'm just going to pick a few more, like so. So now we've got a bunch of shots that are tagged green. Now we don't have a green tagged album. So you've got two choices. You could start to filter. You could hit the filter button in filters, and that would filter to my green. But to me, that's slow because then you're having to constantly turn filters on and off. So it's best if we, again, try to be as smart as possible and avoid the number of mouse clicks. So if we go to session albums and we say, let's make a new smart album with this plus, then we have the ability to obviously give it a title. So let's say green tag. And we want to match all of the following rules. So I can use a preset, which has some handy things. Scott, I saw your question. Can you create a folder for 4 or 5 stars? Yes, there's a preset for 4 or higher. So that would be the rating is greater than or equal to 4, because we have different arguments. Let's just delete that. Or we can have a simple one like the color tag is or is not a certain color, green. So we want a green color tag. Now if we hit plus, you can combine a whole multitude of rules, and the sky's the limit. You have all these various different terms that you can choose from. Most of us probably don't use any of these and just stick to like color tags and star ratings. But you can have date ranges. You could pick the serial number of a camera if you wanted to divide that up and so on. So as I said, we are just going to do color tag is green, like so. Say OK. So now we've got green tag. If we click on that, now we can see all my green tag shots. So I've got 14 photos here. And once again, if you think, did we end up with anything similar? So let's see, they're all pretty unique. So I'm going to get rid of that one. So I'm going to hit 6 on my keyboard. It's gone from that collection. So all these are relatively different. So now we've got 13 shots, but I'm superstitious and that's unlucky. So I'm going to get rid of one more like so. So now we've got 12 shots that we've done. So that's just one, that's my personal method of kind of a double pass culling system. Of course, you don't have to follow that. Some people, as I said, start with 1 star, then bump it up to 2. Start with a color tag and then go to star ratings. But remember, you can shape this however you like with your smart album. So just remember that this is just an example. The smart albums that you can create can be very simple or can be extensive as well. Okay, what about seeing a green tag in one location? I just saw that question pop up. Well, if we go to location 1, then I could turn my filtering on like so. So that would be the way to do it if you want to reduce that. You could probably do it with the smart album as well, but I think in those situations, if we, let's say, okay, out of location 5, what are all the greens? Let's have a look. So we got this one out of location 5. So remember, your filters are also dependent on the collection that you're viewing at as well. Hope that makes sense. Let's have a little look on YouTube and Facebook. Lots of questions coming in, so sorry if we can't get to all of them, but I see my colleagues are helping out brilliantly as well. So they're actually doing my job for me. Great, because then we can focus on what we're doing here. Good sort of follow-up question. Once I'm happy with the results of my work in the session, can I move edited images to a catalog? We're going to have a look at that at the end as well. Okay, so let's just make a last quick check. Andre is blasting through questions in the webinar as well. Good one from Karen, actually, I saw. Can you combine filters? Yeah, so let's say you've done like a 4 or 5 star or a green and yellow. If I do 5, let's just clear that, sorry. Let's make this one 4 stars. So now you can see in location 5, we've got 2 5 stars and 1 4 star. If we want to combine those, hold down Alt or Option, and then you can combine those tags together. If you want to clear your filters, it's the little tiny X up here, and then that will undo any filter that you have. Okay, I need a drink break. And the next thing that we're going to look at is, if you imagine in our scenario, we have got to the point where we have got down to our final set of fantastic pictures, and we would want to do some editing. Now, our editing today is going to be hypothetical because this is not a webinar about editing. So you can just imagine we're going to edit these. They're pretty spectacular out of camera anyway. The only thing I would say in your editing, if you want to copy, apply adjustments across, add metadata, all those kinds of things, all that basic stuff, you can really find on the Learning Hub, learn.capture1.com, in the Getting Started series. So copy, pasting, adjustments, all that kind of stuff is all available on very short tutorials. So let's imagine, people, that we've now gone through and adjusted all of our photos and we are ready to output. And this is where you can really flex some session muscles. So I'm going to delete these recipes that we made earlier, and we're going to start from scratch. So the last tab in our tool tab is really all about exporting to our final format. So going to JPEG, going to TIFF, so on and so forth. With very little effort, you can set up process recipes which will shave off a whole bunch of time from your exporting activities. So what we do is we start off super simple, and what we're going to do, we're going to make Capture One a bit smaller here, like so, and then we're going to go to our session output folder, this one here, so you can see what's happening in real time as we start to export stuff. So we've almost got enough screen real estate, so let's just pop that over there. We'll have to make Capture One a bit skinnier, like so. So now we can see what's going on as we export. Can I make this a bit smaller? No, that's the smallest it will go. So, but that's going to work fine. Let's get rid of that. Find a window. OCD window stuff going on here, I know. Come on, David. There we go. Right. Okay. So a process recipe is simply a preset for how you would like to export your files. So let's set up a really basic one, which is going to be a full-size TIFF, nothing fancy, no resizing, none of that, just a straight out the door full-size TIFF. So we're going to hit plus in our process recipes, and we're going to call this TIFF. 8-bit is fine, and it's going to be full size. I'm just going to put FS for full size. Now underneath, this shows us what this recipe is going to do. You'll see as I click the sort of factory installed ones, you'll see this area changes. So if we go to TIFF 8-bit, then we can say, okay, I want a TIFF. It has to be 8-bit. It's going to be Adobe RGB. That's fine. The scale is fixed, and it's going to be 100%. So it's not going to do anything fancy. Now, if you don't touch anything else in the session, when I hit the process button, everything is automatically going to go into the output folder. So if I select all, so that's going to be 12 photos, and we hit process, then watch the output folder, then straight away 12 lovely TIFFs start pouring into the output folder. Simple. Now, the first benefit of using process recipes, let's delete all of those. Let's chuck them in the trash. The first benefit of using process recipes is that we can run more than one at the same time. So let's say we want a TIFF and we want a JPEG for whatever, speedy web use or something like that. So let's make another process recipe, and that's going to be a JPEG. And let's say for giggles, it's going to be 2000 pixels on the long edge, for example. That's a bit of a long title, so let's just call it 2000 pixels on the long edge. So now I need to change some parameters. So we're going to say JPEG, and it's going to be down to whatever. Let's just reduce the quality a bit. I'm going to change that to sRGB, and I said I wanted my long edge to be 2000 pixels. Like so. So now we've got two different recipes. We've got our TIFF and we've got our JPEG. So now, as they're both checked on, when I hit process, it's going to do both of those at the same time. So let's hit process. And then right away in the output folder, you'll start to see the JPEGs and TIFFs pouring in like so. Great. So that saves me having to go into an export dialog, set up TIFFs, go in back to the export dialog and set up another TIFF or another export parameter. Now the disadvantage of what we're seeing here now is that they're kind of all jumbled together into the output folder, and that's not super elegant. So can we tidy this up somehow? Yes, we can. So let's scroll down to our output location, which has currently been set to output, which again is the default. Notice like the import window, there's also an empty location for a subfolder. Now I could just happily type in here if I wanted to, or we can use some kind of token as well. So if I click on this little box, this shows me all available output tokens, again of which there are many. It's every single metadata term, a whole bunch of other sort of file management stuff that you're probably not going to use, but the one that I'm going to pick up is recipe name, like so. So that's going to automatically sort them into a folder based on their recipe name. So this is a really simple one which all of you can probably make use of. So now if I say process, straight away we get two folders, JPEG 2000, pixels long edge, and TIFF 8-bit full size as well. So if we look at this folder, we've got all our JPEGs, and if we look at this folder, we've got all our TIFFs. Now once again, the disadvantage, if you like, of this method is that the file names are both the same. So if you're super eagle-eyed, or if your OS hides the extension, it's not super obvious the difference between these two files. Oh, by the way, if we look at our JPEG down, I might just have to hide me for a second. If we look at our JPEG, you can see this is resized to 2000 pixels on the long edge as well, like so. Now, as I said, this might not be super simple or super useful because the file naming is the same. So can we use a token to somehow modify our file name? Yes, we can. So if we go to output naming, right now it's just image name. Oh, that's an old token from this morning. So all that's going to do is pull out the image name. But what we could also do is add, again, click on the box, is the same token again, recipe name, like so. And then that will just give you a sample of how it's going to look. Now in between those tokens, I'm just going to put a little underscore just so it's a bit neater. Let's delete everything in this folder, like so. And do the same thing once more. So we've got two process recipes going, and they're going to be put into different subfolders based on their recipe, and we're going to rename the file based on its recipe name as well, all in one click. So there's our process. If we go to JPEG folder, we can now see this guy is called, or girl rather, is the file name plus JPEG 2000, like so. Simples. And if we go to TIFFs, they have their dynamic file name, which is TIFF 8-bit full size, like so. Again, all in one click as well. Hope that makes sense. Already, I hope you're thinking about how much time you can shave off doing your exports as well. But it doesn't end there. If you remember, let's kill our output folder here. If you remember, if we look at these various shots, these all currently live in various different folders. So if we go back to, sessions here, David. If we go back, they all belong in these various different folders. Now, if I'm looking at this shot, I think, where on earth was this shot? Which location is that? Right click, show in library. Capture one let's just scroll down. Doesn't help that we have not much screen real estate going on. But if I right click and say, show in library, like so, capture one says here it is, it's actually in location 4. So that's just a handy tip for finding where that actual shot is. Right click, show in library. So let's choose a different one. So if I go back to my 5-star shots, this one was definitely in a different spot, and say show in library. Capture one says there you go, that's in location 6. Now, wouldn't it be nice if in our output folder we could mirror exactly where these shots came from? So if you have, let's go back to green tag, sorry. If your client says to you, I'd love it if you sorted all these different looks into their respective output folders for me. So I'd love to know that this was look 1, this was look 2, this was look 3, and so on. So you're probably thinking, damn it, then now I have to right click and say show in library and then set up loads of complicated exports. Not so. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to my first process recipe and notice that each recipe has a little file tab as well. Now, if you don't touch this, this is kind of bypassed, if you like. So Capture One says, okay, the output location they want me to use is shown in the output location tool. So currently for this particular recipe, Capture One will look at it and say, okay, the location for this recipe is defined in the output location tool. Okay, so I'm going to look here. Right, I need to make a folder called recipe name and then start my processing. What we can also do, which might make your brains explode a bit, is that we can also set up a subfolder here as well. And it might sound intimidating, but once you get your head around it, it's actually super simple. So if we click on this button, we're going to look for a token which you would never stumble across yourself or understand what it does if I didn't explain it, which is one called session subpath. So you see straight away it's shown me the sample. What session subpath does is it looks at the photo that you want to edit, traces it back to where it belongs in the session, and then mirrors that for the output. So straight away this shot that I've got selected is in location 1, so it's showing me the sample. So we're going to say okay, and what we're also going to do is do a /, or shall we not do that right now? No, let's not. Let's just leave it at that. And then we're going to do the same on my JPEG one as well, and we're going to pick up session subpath as well, like so. So now these two have this session subpath token. So Capture One's going to, when I hit process, it's going to make a subfolder called recipe name, and then it's going to make session subpath. Fingers crossed. So let's select all. So we've got 12 shots, 2 process recipes. Let's say process. So I've got my JPEG 2000 pixels and my TIFFs. If we go into this folder, I can now see location 1 with all the JPEGs like so, and I can now see location 2 with all the TIFFs, and they've still been renamed and everything else as well. Now to set up, what do we got? We've got 12 folders. We've actually got 14 folders that have been created automatically. So that's just a huge time saver. And this is a relatively small amount of shots that we've created. So imagine this on a much bigger session like Serge's fashion shoot with 20 looks with 100 shots in each look. This way you can set it all up, press process, and job done as well. Let's see now. Good question from Ed. What is subname? So that just allows you to give unique naming to individual process recipes. So you see right now when we do our output naming, it's based on the image name and the recipe name, for example. So if in here I put subname, and that could be anything, instead of using the recipe name, you might like to just put a little tag in, like if I write JPEG here, for example. And then in the naming convention, what I can do is that I can also pick up a tag called subname, like so. So you see that's just added the subname of this particular recipe onto the end, like so. So it's a tool to allow you to give unique naming for different recipes. That's simply what it does. So I use it quite a lot. It's actually very useful once you get your head around it as well. Now, if we wanted to, so we're just using single tokens. You can chain tokens together. So for example, if we wanted to change this one, let's just worry about the JPEG one. If I put a /, that tells Capture One to make another subset, like go down a level in the tree. And then let's find color tag. So let's just imagine we had shots which had more than one color tag. Let's just delete these again. And we're going to say process. So now if we look in our JPEG folder, we can see we've got location 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. and a folder which shows me what the color tag was. So if we had a collection which had red, green, blues or whatever, then Capture One could split those up into different color tags too. Now, right now, these recipes have been using the universal output location of this one. But what if you wanted to run another recipe which went to a totally different place? So let's make another recipe, and this is going to be to my cloud storage. So think Dropbox, think Google Drive, think OneDrive, think Box, whatever kind of cloud storage that you can also access at Finder or Windows Explorer level. So now for this cloud storage one, this is going to be a quick proof JPEG, which is like a super speedy JPEG. It's going to be sRGB. In the file tab, I'm not going to have output location. I'm going to choose a different folder. By the way, if you want the photos to be in the same folder, the export, to be in the same folder as the shots that you're looking at, then if you say image folder, it'll drop the exports right next to the original file. So that's what image folder means. So I'm going to say select folder, and we're going to use our imaginary Dropbox because I don't have Dropbox set up on here. And what I need to do is just delete this morning's imaginary Dropbox subfolder. So let's get rid of that. So we're going to put imaginary Dropbox there and see what else we can do here. Now, this one we can also do a subfolder. Now, Renee was super smart because she actually, very rarely for a photographer, added some metadata into the shots. So her creator name is in the metadata of the shots. So on this particular recipe, we can use the subfolder, and you can actually type ahead. So if I start typing creator, then Capture One will show me if there's any matching tokens. So I'm going to use creator like so. So what we'll do is we'll create a subfolder based on the metadata in the creator tag of any given image. Now, if this was 10 different photographers with 10 different creator names, it would make 10 different folders. So we're still going to set up these two as well. Let's just delete what's going on here. And let's say process. Let's go to my imaginary Dropbox. So it's made the subfolder Renee Robin. We've got our shots going in there. It's also called cloud storage because that's the name of the recipe. And then we've got our JPEGs and our TIFFs going there into the output location. Again, all in one click as well. Now that's pretty much the tip of the iceberg of what you can do with process recipes, but generally that's enough for most of us. So the ability to sort by recipe name, the ability to change the name on export is very, very useful. And the ability to either use a universal export location or to use what we just did in the last example, which was to go to an external location or a different location outside of that session. I just saw Daniel's chat, what if your cloud storage needs a password? Can't help you there. So it's got to be a cloud storage which you can access at Finder or Explorer level. So Dropbox is a good example. Google Drive is a good example. OneDrive from Microsoft is a good example, and so on. So anything that you can access at Finder level works great. So you could be throwing quick proof JPEGs on your Dropbox, and then your client could be viewing and approving them easily anywhere else in the world, like so. Dropbox export, mind blown, says Brandy. It's simple when you know how. Like all of these things, process recipes are extremely powerful, but again, it's simple when you know how. We had a question earlier about controlling metadata, so don't forget for each process recipe you can control what metadata is in there. So if you don't want anyone to know your camera metadata or the ratings and color tags or any of that stuff, you can control that quite nicely here as well. Stuff we didn't get in time for in terms of adjustments, you can also set output sharpening on a per recipe basis, and of course we can also set a watermark on a per recipe basis. So something like for the cloud storage, you might like to put on there your do not copy, your logo, company name, all that kind of stuff. The cool thing is about the text overlay, this can also be tokenized. So if you want to put the file name across the middle of the shot as well, then you can also do so with a token. So we would just use image name wherever it is. So you get the idea. So watermarking can be just as dynamic as anything else as well. Cool. Last thing, let's just check a little bit of questions. In terms of when is Capture One going to do so-and-so, unfortunately, it's very rare we comment on the future roadmap, with the exception of when we gave you a sneak peek of heal and clone tools. If there is something that you want, really the best way to do it is to go to our support page, support.captureone.com, and make a feature request. That's far more likely to be successful than telling me, because I'll forget, and everything that goes to the support page is automatically logged in the system, and then we can very easily gauge, you know, the momentum of the public, if you like. So it's best thing to do, go to support.captureone.com. Any sort of future roadmap stuff we don't comment about. Okay, so where were we? Oh, one last thing to cover. Let me just have a little look at past questions. And again, I'm keeping the questions on today's subject. So again, if there's anything that kind of is a bit out of left field of today, please don't be offended if it doesn't get answered. And I'm avoiding catalog stuff. Best thing to do if you're asking about catalogs, go back to the previous organizing with catalogs, and then that way, that will probably answer most of your questions. Question here about synchronizing recipes. So if you go to Finder, there's a support article about this. Maybe one of my colleagues can find it. At least I think there is. If you go to the Go menu and hold down Alt, that will expose the library folder. Helps if you keep Alt pressed down. Hang on, go library. Oh, it's popping up on my other screen. Hang on, let's just make a new Finder window. Go library, like so. There we go. Oh, it was doing it down there. Open your eyes, David. If we look at application support, Capture One, then you'll see a whole bunch of Capture One goodies and so on. One of those is recipes. So you can see all the recipes that we did. So you can easily copy those across to other machines. So it's, again, application support Capture One, and then you can see the recipes like so. So if you want to dupe that across to other machines, you can. On Windows, it's in a folder called app data, but I can't remember the exact path, but I'm pretty sure you'll find it on our support pages as well. Jim, that's a good question, Jim. The answer is no, sorry. Can you set up an automatic export as soon as it's captured? Can you do that? No, but there is a shortcut. So I've been hitting the process button. The shortcut by default is Command D. So if at any point you think, okay, I've got, you know, quite a few images in the pool, let's hit Command D and then it will export them out. So that's probably the best workaround for that one. Now, last thing that we had to cover was browsing a master session. Now this came up because of last week's webinar with Joe McNally, because he wanted a simple way just to browse his existing catalogue of shots or back catalogue of photos. So we discussed, should we make a catalogue? Yes, we could. The benefit of a catalogue is that there's more powerful ways to organize with virtual collections, but Joe had already done his organization at a folder-based level. So he didn't really need any catalog benefits. He just needed a simple way to browse his existing NAS drive, his external drives, his internal drives, and so on. So let's close that down. Easy, it will take you 30 seconds to set up. Let's say File, New Session. On my machine, I call this a utility session. Utility session in angry capitals. Doesn't matter where you put it. Say OK. Go to the first tab. We're not going to use session folders. We're not going to use albums, and we're not going to use favorites. Here is everything that can be seen on your system. So if I just start browsing my folders, then for example, if we find Renee's folder again, Renee, like so, then Capture One will instantly start reading it. That's it. So now you can browse any folder on your system as you wish. So I use this quite regularly. Just if I want to have a quick nose into a folder, then I can just open my utility session and browse to it like so. So super simple. Relatively quick as well. Capture One will need to build previews for each one. So there is like a slight pause. The only thing you will have to live with, if I right click and say show in Finder, you will have to live with Capture One creating a sidecar file, because Capture One needs that for the session to work properly. So if your OCD bothers you having a little Capture One sidecar file, don't use this method. Otherwise you can use a catalog. But the benefit of a catalog gives you more extensive ways to organize. But if you just want to browse an existing system, this is really a super easy way to do it. The last thing, and I know we're over time, but I have to say it. Let's say like me, you've ended up with lots and lots of sessions, which you might. Then is there an easy way to kind of see all your sessions at once? Yes, you can make a catalog of sessions. Might be a bit sort of head exploding, but it's actually a pretty simple concept. So if I make a new catalog, and I'm going to call this my session overview catalog, and say OK, that's going to be a brand new empty catalog. All I have to do is say File, Import Session. Now, very important caveat here, make sure your session is where you want it to be before you do this, because Capture One doesn't move the session, it's just simply referencing it where it is. So what I do is once I've finished with my session on my internal hard drive, I move it to my big external hard drive. Then I import it into my catalog. So this is a process I do when the session is very much done and finished. The other reason for that is that the session and catalogs will not talk to each other. So if I open the session and tweak an image, that's not going to be reflected in the catalog, and vice versa. So once it's in the catalog or archived into the catalog, and think of it as an archival process, at that point you should not open the session again, otherwise you're going to get in a mess with different adjustments and so on. So all I have to do is find the session. So Renee, point to the co-session DB brain and say import like so. And what Capture One will do is make a project. It will make me a group of all the session folders, all the session albums, and all the session favorites. So I can go to the various different locations, as you can see, like so. And it will have all my edits, all my adjustments, and so on. And it will have my various different session albums as well. And then each session will have its own neat little project like so. But if I was to open this session by itself, so let's just actually do that. Let's bring up the Finder. So if I was to open the session, double click like so. If I start messing with this picture of Tina, then it's not going to be reflected in my catalog archive. So just really think of it as an archive. When the session is done, I want a way to see all my sessions in one place. That's really the best way to consider it. Okay, now we're done. I think that was everything that was supposed to be covered today. Let's have a look. Okay, just looking. Oh, there we go. There's a handy tip from Class A. Full path on Windows. So commit that to memory now. So it was app data local Capture One, and then you can find that. Oh, good question. I saw Sarah ask, can you move that sessions catalog to a different computer? Well, the same rules apply. So we've basically made a catalog. I made this on my hard drive. So wherever I move my session overview catalog, I can open it from. Remember, when you import a session into a catalog, it does not move the session. It's referencing it to where it is. So there's no file movement going on. I just lost my train of thought. What was I going to show? Oh, moving a session. So let's close this down. This is one of the super cool things about session. So this is the one we were working on with our different locales. Let's say we were shooting on location and we want to move this from a laptop to another computer, or we want to back it up, or we simply want to stick it on a hard drive. So if I grab Rene and stick it on Traveller SSD, then Capture One is just going to copy everything over. This takes the photos, the adjustments, organization, everything. So now if I grab this session and double click on co-session DB, it's going to open that session. It's got all my session favorites. It's the same. So a session is highly portable, which is also, I think, one of the benefits of using it, because you can move it around from pillar to post really, really easily as well. Or you could put it on cloud storage for safety. So you've got your session on your computer, your backup on your external hard drive, and then your third backup on cloud storage as well. So that's, again, a really simple, compelling argument for using a session as well. Now, performance-wise, I'm running this off an external SSD. That's going to run just as fast as if I was running off the internal hard drive itself. So no loss of performance there. If your external hard drive was a super old USB 1, steam-driven, slow-spinning hard drive, it's going to be much slower. But an external SSD over Thunderbolt, it's going to be super fast. Last little tip for the organizing junkies there is that, let's say this kind of organization that we're doing here, let's say this is something you can do regularly, like you always have 10 looks, or you have a 10 look setup, a 15 look setup, a 20 look setup, or your session albums, you've spent a lot of time creating those. It would be really annoying to have to go back in and keep doing the same setup over and over and again. So any session, you can save that as a session template. Here it is, save as template. So if we call this my default organization, helps if I can spell default org, like so. This will save your session albums, your session favorites, any naming convention you've set up for tethered shooting. So if you like to name when you shoot tethered, it will also save that in the next capture naming tool, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So if we say save, like so. So now if I was to make a brand new session, file new session, notice we've got a template drop down here. So I'm going to pick my default org. Let's say we're doing another Nevada shoot, like so, and we say OK. It's set up all those albums and all my different locations as well. So if we look at the session itself, Nevada shoot, it's already set up all that kind of stuff. So tethered shooters out there, don't laboriously make the same setups each time you want to go to shoot. Have your bank of look folders like that. I'd also recommend making a folder called lighting setup or test or whatever, which you can fill with all the crappy stuff as you're you know, setting up your lights, dialing in exposure, all of those kinds of things. So again, that saves you a good 15 minutes of work setting up all those various different things. So that was save as template. And when you make a new session, don't forget to recall your template here as well, like so. Okay, now we're done. I think I said that before as well. Let's have a look at the last few questions. Yes, Dag. So the smart procedure secure-wise is to move a session into one storage location as a permanent backup and then import to catalog as an archive and work from the catalog later on. Yes, exactly. So that's what I do to clarify. Once I'm done with my session, it goes from my internal hard drive to my external. I import it into my catalog, and forever thereafter, I only look at it in the catalog. Simple as that. Now, if you didn't want to import the whole session, you could just import the captures folder. Then you would just do a normal import process. But the session import is so speedy and so handy, that's really the easiest way to do it. Okay, last few questions in the webinar room. Thanks, Andre, for helping out as well. His fingers are probably burning. Could you delete the session after you imported it into a catalog? No, because it will disappear from the catalog. You could delete the co-session DB file if you wanted to. You could delete that, but again, not much benefit. Remember, when you import it into a catalog, it's referenced. So all it's doing is looking at the session. It's not moving anything. It's not putting the photos anywhere else. It's looking where it is and building from thereafter. So do not delete your session once you've imported it into your catalog. That would be bad. So Anthony was saying, so how are the catalogs updated if you edit a session? They are not. The two databases don't talk to each other. So once again, treat that import into a catalog process as an archive, and then thereon after, you don't open the session, you look at it in the catalog. Could you convert a catalog into a session? Well, yes and no, really. It depends how you want to do it. I mean, if you've already built an extensive catalog, there's not much benefit in converting it into a session because they do two different things. Remember, catalog, broad overview of all your work, session, a single project. So they're really kind of two different animals. Can you move a picture from one session to another? Yeah, it's just drag and drop. So if I wanted to move, you know, this photo from this session to a session, I would just do it in the Finder. It will lose the adjustments. So the way around that, so let's open up, let's imagine I've edited this lovely shot of Tina. So let's pretend we've done a quick edit in some shape or form. What we can do is right click on it and say pack as EIP. So notice it changes to EIP. Now if I right click and say show in Finder, like so. So now it's an EIP, which means it has the adjustments inside as well. So if I was to move this to Nevada shoot, let's just stick this in location 1. I'm going to look like an idiot if it doesn't work. And then open up Nevada shoot. Go to location 1, there's Tina, and then you can see now it's got the adjustments. Simple as that. So EIP means enclosed image something. I'm not sure what the P stands for. I was going to say enclosed image format, but that doesn't make sense. But that wraps up the adjustments as well. Oh, my camera has just died. Apologies, it overheated. So that's why there is a black space. Not trying to kick everyone out, but that's why. Hopefully you can still hear me fine as well. So many thanks for everybody joining and interacting today. Thanks to my colleagues for bailing me out on the back end of answering various questions and so on. Don't forget, don't be a stranger. If you need to ask a question or get support, that's support.capture1.com. Oh, enhanced image package. Thank you, Manuel. That's what it was. If you need support, support.capture1.com. Hit us up on social media as well. And that way we can always help you out. Great. Thanks, everybody, for joining today, and see you all again soon. Come back next week for more live sessions and webinars and things. Take care, everybody, and see you all soon. Bye now.